Should you use justified text or left aligned text for the paragraphs, for the formatting of the paragraphs in your book? The short answer to this question is justified. If you're writing something like a novel, or something it's a non-fiction book, but it's a similar sort of format overall to a novel. It doesn't have a lot of pictures; it's mostly text. If you're doing something like that, you should use justified text or justified formatting for your paragraphs rather than left aligned. If you pick up just a random book, a random novel off a shelf, and you look inside, odds are you're going to see that it's justified text rather than left aligned text. Some books do go for left aligned, but it's pretty uncommon. The general convention, the general tradition is to go for justified text. That's the short answer to this question. Now for the longer answer. So the answer to this question really depends on the context. So if you were doing something, if you were creating a book that was like a coffee table book, and it was a coffee table book on maybe, I don't know, astronomy or like some part of history like the ancient Egyptians or the Romans or the Greeks, or if it was about the Amazon rainforest or whatever it was about, just doing like a coffee table book. So it was a really large book, like hardcover with lots of photographs in it, like glossy pages, lots of images on the page, lots of interesting different layouts. If you're doing something like that, you might well choose to use left-aligned text in different parts of it, because depending on the layout, it might have a small piece of text in one place or a small, short paragraph somewhere, and that might look better in that particular case. And similarly, if you were doing something that was even further away from a novel than that, if you were doing something online, creating some sort of web page, you would almost certainly use left-aligned text by default. That's very common on the internet. It's actually very uncommon to see justified text online, even though it's pretty easy to do. And that's just kind of the convention, the tradition that we've sort of gotten used to. And it tends to look a bit better. Like justified text can look a bit weird sometimes on websites, probably because of the different size of the screen compared, and the different aspect ratio of a screen compared to a piece of paper. So the actual answer to this question, or the full answer to this question, really depends on the context. This video and this channel is focused much more just on novels and on things that are like novels, so like non-fiction books that are about something scientific, perhaps, where you're probably going to use a very similar kind of formatting to you would in a novel. This video is focused on that, so that's mainly what we're going to look at. It's worth, so before going into more of the details of it, let's just go over more about what is justified text and what is aligned text. So this is justified text. Most people are familiar, if you've used Microsoft Word, you're familiar with getting this. You just press that button there, which is the justify button. That makes it go like that. This isn't the default. When you open Microsoft Word by default, it's all the text is left aligned. You actually have to press that in order to get it if you want it. And this is left aligned text. Now, I think for most people, justified text, this sort of thing, looks a bit odd. I think for most people, because, and I think that's largely because we're so used to seeing this by default when we start Microsoft Word. We open Microsoft Word, we start typing something, and this is what we get. So this is what we get used to. And I think a lot of people therefore think this looks a little bit weird, and a lot of people don't like it, which is why, particularly among people doing self-publishing, there's sometimes a little bit of a reluctance to make it like this, because I think people think it looks a little bit weird. So what's going on here? Obviously, left-aligned text, you've got all of the left-hand sides of the lines are all lined up, but the right-hand sides aren't. And that's because, obviously, you've got different numbers of words in each line. You've got certain spaces in each line, and it just happens that the lines don't end up the same length when you do that. Justified text then is when, like, the way, you've got both the left-hand side and the right-hand side, left-hand sides and right-hand sides of the lines are lined up. And the way that Word does that, and the way that typesetting programs do that, is that on on some lines, if a line doesn't have quite enough letters in it in order to fill up the line, it'll just make the spaces bigger. So you can see on this line, that's got quite big spaces, whereas on this line, those are quite small spaces. And so by adjusting the spacing on each line, it can get both the ends to line up. There is an extra detail to this, which is that, so Word has the option to do left aligned, which is that one, centered, or center aligned and right aligned. Center aligned, of course, is, neither of the ends line up, and it's just about the middle lining up. Word only has this option, and Word calls those left aligned, I think, align left or left alignment, right aligned, or just center alignment and right alignment. But Word only actually has this option here, which Word just calls justify or justified text, is actually, strictly speaking, left justified text. And what that means is that this final line here, on this final line, the number of words was so small. If Word had stretched this line or these words all the way across this line, the spaces would be so big that actually it would be quite jarring. I mean, you can imagine this, in an even more extreme example. Imagine if you only had 2 words on the final line. If Word then tried to stretch those out across the entire line, you'd have one on the left and one on the right and a huge gap in between, and that would just look silly. So there's always a cutoff point where Word just decides, actually, it's not going to try to spread the words out. And in that case, what does it do? Well, in left justified text, it moves all of the words over to the left, as it would with left aligned. There is then also the option to do right justified text, where all of these lines, which are full, get justified, and then this final line gets put on the right. And then there would also be center justified, where it gets put in the middle. Word, as far as I know, Word doesn't have the options to do that. There might be an option to do it somewhere, like if you go into paragraph settings, maybe there's an option somewhere. Maybe that's what you like. I've actually not tried. There we go. So distributed. In this case, distributed it's just turning off that cutoff point where it says, okay, these spaces are too large. I mean, if I just remove everything, apart from that, you see that looks a little bit silly. It can also look a bit stylish if you once you're used to it. So it also has distributed, which is that button there. Very unusual to use distributed. Really distributed, it's not a different style of alignment, it's just turning off that cutoff point. The Word calls this just justified text. It's left justified text, and this is left aligned text. Now, as I say, a lot of people find this a bit weird, I think, when they first start using Word. And I think when people learn that this is how you're supposed to do it in novels, they think, oh, that looks a bit weird. I don't really want to do that. I want to do this. Sometimes novels will do this. You do see it occasionally. But it's pretty unusual. Overwhelmingly, this is the general style. It's the conventional style. It's the traditional style. And even though this can look a little bit weird at first, once you get used to it, it does start looking nicer. It does start looking better. When you see a whole page of text where both sides completely line up, it can look very, very nice and very, very elegant. And after a while, if you're formatting your book yourself, after a while, if you see this enough times, it'll start to look a little bit strange. And it does tend to set apart a book if it's a self-published book. It does tend to really flag the book as being not properly formatted. Even if it was a conscious choice by the person doing it, it looks a bit amateurish. So this is the convention. Once you get used to it, you do find that it does start to look very nice, very elegant. This is left justified. You just click on that button again. That's all you have to do. You would use this for the paragraph text of your novel only. So within the actual chapters, all of those paragraphs you would format in this way. The actual titles of the chapters, you'd normally do left or center aligned, depending on your style preference. Your chapter titles wouldn't normally be long enough to make this relevant, but even if they were, you almost certainly wouldn't use it. It's not really used for headings and titles. It's just for the paragraph text, which is obviously the main chapters of the book, and possibly if you have appendices and that sort of thing, this might go there as well. So it looks a bit weird if you've not used it before, but it is the convention, it is the tradition, and it does, after you've used it for a bit, it does start to look nicer to you. So I'd say go along with it, just try using it, and eventually, if you don't like it at first, you'll probably come to like it over time. But if for no other reason, do it because this is the general convention, the general tradition for styling novels.